Talk loud.
I consider Jim a brilliant person. He was very intelligent. I realized that when he came back from teaching in Central America, decided to get his master's degree. They lived in San Luis Obispo. He got it in 1 year at Cal Poly. And then he got a really good job in Saudi Arabia. He had a real facility learning languages. He told me once he felt as much Mexican as not because he thought like the Mexican culture. He could speak it fluently. He got their humor, they got his. And it was, he picked up the Saudi language pretty easily, I imagine, and able to, in order to do his job, at least well enough to do his job.
I didn't see the business side at all because
Yeah.
the women were segregated.
Yes.
So I don't know about that.
He was very knowledgeable about finances, and that was one of the ways we related because our mother is elderly, and I take care of her finances now, and I often would go to Jim for advice because he knew so much about it. And that was the last time I spoke with him. It was about 2 or 3 days before he passed, and I had called with a little question about something to do with the finances. And then he told me it was almost like he knew on some level because it was like a goodbye. And he said, "You and your sister have turned out so well." He said, "You have such a good work ethic, and I'm just so proud of what great women you are." And he said, "I'm so glad that I married Barbara. She has been so helpful to me." And going through his, he was quite ill at the end, very weak. He could barely talk on the phone. I was shocked how he sounded very winded and tired, and he made the effort to tell me those things. And the last thing I said to him was, "I love you." I'm so happy that that was the last thing I said to him. The other thing that really sticks in my mind about Jim was he really took a great interest in my 2 daughters, and he would, especially the younger one, when she was in high school, he used to call her up and say, "Well, what are your plans for college?" And then when she was in college, "What are you going to do for your career? And tell me about your boyfriend."
I can take him out back if that
She
be
felt like she was getting the 3rd degree, and it kind of annoyed her that he was, quizzing her like this. But she told me recently that it really was helpful because by him taking that interest in asking her these questions, it forced her to clarify her thinking on these matters, and that was something that she really appreciated in hindsight. So he was a really wonderful person, and I enjoyed all my interactions with him. We stayed with them in Costa Rica for a while for a vacation. It was wonderful, and just a really great man who will be greatly missed.
Okay, so I'm the one that's known him the longest, and I want to tell you how we met. We met in high school. He said he saw me in the hallway, and I had really bad acne, and I was going to the dermatologist all the time and taking lots of tetracycline, and they were lancing these awful boils. It was really awful. So I would cry myself to sleep thinking, I'm so ugly, my skin is so awful, no one will ever be able to look at me, I'll never be married, it's hopeless. And I went to a conference in my early 20s, and the speaker talked about the things about you that you have no control over, the family that you're born into, your sex, your birth order, your eye color, your bone structure, your nationality, all these things that you have no control over, God planned for you. And Psalm 139 says, "For you did form my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you for you are fearfully," well, some translations say, "I am fearfully and wonderfully made." This one says, "You are fearful and wonderful. Wonderful are your works. You know me right right well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. So God planned all these things about me. After I heard those things, I accepted my skin, and I quit wearing tons of pancake makeup, and eventually my skin got better, and I never thought a thing about my face again. But I still struggled with the fact that my ears stick out. And I have tried my darndest to hide those ears. Because you can see one now, not the other one. Well, here I am hiding my ears. Guess who saw those ears in the hallway in the high school? He said, that's why he noticed me. And he was attracted to them. I find that so amazing that the thing that I still struggle with attracted me to him. So that's one of my stories. If you all have, and I'm sure you do, have things that you'd like to share, please stand up and speak loudly so we can all hear and record. And let's just tell some stories that some of us here in the room have to share about Jim. Introduce yourself.
I'm Ron Gahagan. I'm the one responsible for getting him to act like a Texan. I was assigned that responsibility by Frank Grubbs. Frank said, you got to do something with Jim. He sticks out like a sore thumb. I said, all right, so we started going to lunch. We went to lunch together so much, everybody thought I was Jim's daddy. And he loved that. He really did. I found him to be a very thoughtful person. He spent a lot of time, we spent a lot of time talking about his son. He used to worry about his son. I said, don't worry about him. He's going to be all right. He's a boy. He's in Texas. One of the funny things he told me after he had been home, seeing his old buddies out there on the west coast, he said, you're doing a good job, you must be, because they tell me I talk like a damn Texan. So that's where I got to know him and running around with him. And I consider him to be my very best friend. I'm lucky to have about 3 or 4 of them right here, and they're all in this room. So I just want to say that I didn't hear it quite like Barbara just told you, but I'm not going to tell you what he told me. Thank you.
And Barbara and I sang together. Thanks to her, she pushed me to do it. And we played bells together in church. And also, Jimmy is the same age as my older child, Elizabeth, so they've known each other since 5th grade. And what I found about Jim, and you reminded me of this, so good to see you, he tended to quiz you. He would ask you questions, and after you had been around him, you think, did I just get, the 3rd degree? Because he would ask you things and make you think about what you're saying, and sometimes he would smile at me, and I thought, he thinks I'm some kind of strange Southern gal, because he just does not get the way I talk, or the way I cook, or the way I approach things. He usually get a physical expression. But always had a deep conversation for you, even if it was just a minute. And there was never just small talk. I'd run into him by the library, or when I was working at Bell's in Marble Falls. I saw him, and a lot of times I would see him waiting for you to get back from Johnson City for y'all to have dinner. And I think one of you was surprising the other, like, oh, where are we going to meet for dinner? It was kind of a fun thing y'all did, maybe. But I see him in the Walmart parking lot, and we talked for just a minute. But I missed seeing him over the last few years, and I regret that. But we love Jim a lot.
this funny one from one of his housemates. He lived in 2 different houses in Fresno. It's a little long, but it's funny. This is written by Curtis Nickel. Jim, Steve Keister, Ben Shaver, and I rented a home together around 1977-81. We didn't have much then, but the 4 of us sure enjoyed hanging out together. Steve described Jim and I as the original odd couple. We were so different, yet good friends with mutual respect. Jim had the uncanny gift of being able to fix or rebuild anything. It was not unusual to come home to find him working on a motor or other equipment on the living room carpet. I would clean up, and Jim would mess up. I had to make a no living room rule. Jim loved to talk on the phone. We had a phone cord that took the phone anywhere in the house. He was often in my bedroom, the best kept, most comfortable room in the house. I would find him in front of my color TV, sitting in my rocking chair, talking and eating. Or we might find him in the bathroom on the phone with the door wide open. That open door policy again. Along those lines, one time I found myself joined by him in the shower.
What?
We were both in a rush to go somewhere. Before I knew it, there he was. I did want some boundaries. One day I baked a cake, iced it, and went to work. I was really looking forward to having dessert when I got home at 11 p.m. Jim was working long hours on the farm and often came home famished. You guessed it, I came home to a plate of a few crumbs. He ate the whole thing all by himself. I was not happy. I have fond memories of going to Southern California to meet his mother and brothers and going to Ensenada. It was my first trip outside of the United States, and I marveled at the ease with which Jim managed in a different culture. He always seemed to have a heart for overseas work. During those years, I enjoyed riding on the tractor with him at the farm, talking world traveler and about girls, marriage, and of course the Lord. I can honestly say I always wanted to be more like Jim than me. He had such a humble spirit. I had and have such great admiration for him. Isn't that nice?
So my parents sent, I'm going to read something that my mother wrote. Oh my goodness, when I first met Jim, we were both standing in the registration line for the first day of school at Westmont College in Santa Barbara. He was tall, wore his hair long with short clipped straight bangs. He'd run into car trouble on the way up from San Diego and had to leave his car somewhere to be fixed. He'd hitchhiked the rest of the way, and we had worked out a solution to his immediate financial woes. Fast forward 30 or so years, and I had absolutely no recollection of the event. But Jim has told and retold that story of our meeting nearly every time he met new people who were my friends. I guess it meant something to him then. He lived from hand to mouth, as it were, and was a creature foreign to my experience at the time. I mean, I was a sheltered daughter of the Middle Eastern conservative American family. It was the 70s hippie era. Our outward appearance led to some misunderstandings from time to time on this small conservative Christian campus. Jim seemed oblivious to the impact he had with his goofy, sort of stoned-out type behavior. He was a new believer and was intent on discovering what Christ really meant for him on a daily basis, and not on the basis of what the professors or RAs seemed to be pitching as normal Christianity. Actually, many of us were seeking to learn what it meant to be an authentic Christian and not just a churchgoer. We often snuck off campus and went into town where a group of us would take all-night study breaks at one of the other all-night diners there. We had several classes together: world civilization, history, New Testament, Old Testament. I don't remember the details of our discussions, but I do remember taking off another weekend and camping out in the mountains above Santa Barbara to discover we all bedded down on the open sky in a manure-dotted cow pasture. The next morning, a bull ran off the ground. I introduced Jim to Ken, started hanging out together. Jim came and spent a night or two with Ken down in Orange County, and I think they went to a 10 years after concert together. Another time, Ken and I went down to Chula Vista where the guys spent hours working on cars in the garage. I was pretty bored, but I do remember lots of joking and attempts at practical jokes, even though I think Jim was going through some relationship difficulties at the time. In college, the second year, he got involved in Operation Mobilization, a youth-oriented mission group which sent kids on short-term outreaches to various countries where they did literature distribution. Jim, through his Operation Mobilization contacts, learned about a new organization called Friends of Turkey, which would gather addresses from phone books and send material talking about Christ to people living at those addresses. We sent some packages, and Ken got replies back then in Turkish from people wanting to convert him to Islam. Ken would bring them over, and my father would translate them for him. That's where Ken's first interest in Turkey came from. Jim said that he had a real heart for Turkey from then on, too. I introduced Jim to my parents, and Jim told me that my dad's word to him, Christ is the reason for everything we do, impacted him powerfully. Again, 30 years later, he was recounting this event as if it were yesterday. One Christmas holiday, Jim talked Ken into going on an OM trip to Mexico City with a group of people from the USA. They would sleep on a concrete floor of a church and distribute literature. Part of the deal was reading through lots of books and committing their whole heart to Jesus with radical abandon. Ken thought Jim was going with them, but when they got to the bus, Jim said he had other plans, and Ken was sitting there thinking he'd been set up. 2 weeks later, he learned and told Jim, this missionary thing is too difficult, I can't do it. Funny how things turned out. My parents have been missionaries for over 30 years now.
And I went on that trip to Mexico.
You did?
Yeah, with Gary Love.
But
He's a friend of
but
Randy.
Jim didn't go.
And Jim didn't go.
I was like, after fun. My dad was totally excited. He thought they were all going to go. And then, okay, all right. In 2003, we got reconnected after several years of not seeing each other. He had loads of experience working with nonprofits and civic organizations and offered his advice and presence in our Friends of Cartland board meetings and during trips to Ankara, where he made many, many friends. He loved Pastor Ihsan and his wife Chidem and the Kurzweil Church. We'd have meals together and laugh as each told stories of crazy situations, as well as his or her testimony of how we came to know Jesus personally. He'd attend the gatherings of the team who were working at the Sarai Orphanage for the disabled, and although he couldn't seem to remember one Turkish word from the next, I don't know what happened with Turkish in his language. Turkish news was not the one. He seemed to be able to communicate with everyone. The woman at the bakery across the street, and he would spend several minutes every day doing impromptu English and Turkish lessons. He traveled with our disabled co-workers, Nejla and her 2 brothers, Hassan and Mesut, up to the Black Sea coast to visit some of the disabled young adults who were being cared for by the Cartland Caregivers. There he was able to get into the institution and encourage everyone by his smiles and positive words. Bashak, the bookkeeper for Cartland at the time, remembers Jim with great affection. Jim impacted my life with his gentle leadership and patient hygiene of the bookkeeping program. We laughed a lot, and I could share about my spiritual journey with him without any fear. At our staff meeting last month, after we'd heard the news of Jim's passing, everyone shed tears. Please tell Barbara and Jimmy that we love Jimmy, because we know he loved us and always wanted to encourage us and help us to do a better job. Thank you.
Share Narita's sister's letter. Stand up, please.
Okay. This letter is from June Bostic, Katrina Zod, and Narita's sister. The other day, as I sauteed some beef for a pot of chili that is a family favorite, I was reminded of the time that Jim came for dinner and ate 3 bowls full. He just couldn't help himself, he said. But this was said with a twinkle in his eye and a huge grin, the kind of impishness that Big Jim oozed. That memory is connected to who I am as a home cook, and that is where I last picture this wonderful man. I remember meeting Jim when my older sister, Narita, brought him home from Westmont. She was always bringing home people, and they weren't her boyfriends either. Her forever love, Ken, was cool with that. So cool that Jim became Ken's friend for life, too. He was even in their wedding. Brown-haired, hazel-eyed Jim sat up on our chest freezer and sort of flirted with me, and I was in awe. No one had ever flirted with me, and I fell for him, just a little. Sort of weird reading that. My sister took us home to his home in Chula Vista on a trip to Mexico. But after a while, I just enjoyed knowing this guy who had loved people of all types. He wanted to know all about you when he talked to you. He gave you his full attention. At the same time, he seemed to tease you. That was like having an older brother who loved and kidded you. Jim adopted my parents and took on the role of Uncle Jim to Katrina and my 4 kids. He wanted to know about their lives too, and brought wisdom from travels and life experiences, and from his love for our Lord Jesus. He never judged, but brought a serious type of fun to every conversation. He got up at Katrina's wedding and gave a great speech, sweetly honoring and kidding our crabby elderly aunt. She was charmed, blushing, and yet confused. Who was this great big non-Armenian guy? We all danced up a storm while the rain pattered outside. Another really fun memory. Was there pain in Jim's heart? His condition was a headache, and he had some concerns that might have troubled him. But he was a steadfast man of God who loved, served with his wisdom and knowledge, such as with Friends of Cardolan Ministry and Kifas Wheelchair Company, and that faith that had those concerns would have come out right. The grief we share at this time for the should-haves and could-haves of life that we consider too short. Our grief is real, and yet knowing that Jim is with us, our Jesus, and that heaven is a glorious place of rest, we have a deep peace and hope.
I'm getting stuck in the chair. My name is Alexander Holliday. I met Mr. Evans through his son Jimmy. We were roommates at our first apartment. He and I went through a lot with a roommate running out on us and
leaving us to foot the bill and
saving her from
taking
her
the
apartments,
taking the furniture from us.
furniture. It was a mess, but Mr. Evans helped us through it, you know, giving us advice. It seems to me that him quizzing people is a common theme. Because he did the same thing as well. He always wanted to know what was going on with you, how he could help. Gave me a lot of advice, like I'm horrible with time management and planning and stuff like that, and he gave me advice on how to become better at doing such. Let's see. He told me stories about how in the past he wasn't the way that he was when I met him, that he went through a lot of rough patches in his teen years and his younger years, and he said, well, look how I am today. He was very firm in his belief of the Lord. He told me to make dancing like maybe my career, because I teach dance now, trying out for dancing shows and stuff like that, and he said, no, that's a bankable talent. That's like something you can take all the way. So that's something that I'm trying to do right now. He was just a very intelligent man, very wise, in my opinion. I'm not up there in wisdom yet. So for me, he gave a lot of good advice, and he's going to be greatly missed by everyone. Anyone who knew him, anyone who touched him, anyone who he touched. He was just that type of person that you just don't forget about.
Beth Hahn, this is my mother right here. I'm friends with Jimmy since 5th grade and such. He graduated. But Jim was always just so welcoming, so was Barbara. I mean, I loved going out to the lake and swimming with Jimmy and our little friends, Eric and all them, just all hanging out and stuff like that. But through the years, Jim and I would see each other at church occasionally, and he was always everyone, very good to everybody, and you know, he was a little awkward to be around for me because I was just like, you know, you're so intelligent, telling me all these things that I should do, and you know, I really appreciated it now, you know, looking back, like what he was doing out, looking out for everybody. He had that great personality. Just, you know, there's Jim. You know, he's in the room, but he's in your heart at the same time. He's just getting in there. But another cool thing is that even through the years, you know, I wouldn't see him because I was going off to college and, you know, trying new things and exploring what I wanted to do with my life. Every time I'd post something on Facebook, this is stupid, excuse me, but, you know, I'd post like, oh, I had a bad day or something like that. And he would send me quotes or send me like, you know, hey, just keep your head up, or just like my little thing I said, or, I mean, those small little things really mean a lot. And he was a great father for you, and he was really inspirational for everyone he was around. And he has a good place in my heart, and I know he does, and everyone else is here. So I really appreciate what he gave me.
About what Jim was doing overseas. This British fellow, I wish he could read this because that accent, he's handsome anyway, and then that British accent. But this is from Robert Babington Smith. I remember the day I first met Jim. It was in 1995 in Nicaragua. I had been in country for about 9 months as a struggling volunteer working for a small non-governmental organization as a business advisor. It was an introductory meeting to talk business synergies. One of those meetings where everyone tells everyone else how great their program was without telling anyone what they actually did. In walked Jim, tall, very confident, and very American brash, cutting to the chase almost immediately with, everything I'm hearing sounds like bull. If you want to work successfully with farmers, you need to help them make more money in their pockets. Sum it up, that's what it's all about. It was, wow, he's right. Did he just say that? The next day, Jim called me in the office. I was surprised. After the previous day's meeting, I didn't think he would be interested in the work that I did. It was the first of many weekly calls. Each time, he encouraged me to work together on projects that were farmer and community focused. At first, working with Jim was intimidating. He demanded everything and more, but as time went on, he softened, and I realized he really was pushing for the very best for farmers in poverty. He very much cared for them as people. He believed in his work, and he believed in making a difference. What's more, he commanded tremendous respect, trust, and really made a significant contribution to the lives of farmers in poverty. I have so many memories of this work. For example, Doña Sofia, and Doña is a term like Mr. or Mrs., but more of endearment. Our housekeeper that we had from El Salvador was Doña Gloria, and I have been called Doña Barbara, and Jim is Don Jim. Doña Sofia, an extremely industrious coffee producer that ran her small 10-acre farm with military efficiency and pride. We had started a project selling organic coffee to a well-known coffee company in England, Taylor's of Harrogate, under the brand Feel Good Coffee. The company agreed to pay producers substantially more money than the local market, resulting in Doña Sofia making a huge $30,000 in her second year. With the additional money, she purchased a small pickup truck, something she had only dreamed of before. But far more importantly for her, she managed to pay for the medicine that helped cure her husband from a long-term illness. I remember clearly how grateful she was to the work of the project, and especially Jim for opening the door of opportunity that only a few years before small farmers didn't even dream of as a possibility. Today, I am doing business with many of the small producer groups from the projects that Jim started in Nicaragua. They have come a long way from the days when we started in 1995, when no serious buyer believed in them. Today, some of the groups run very impressive operations. The seed of hope and confidence was sown by Jim, and it has continued to grow, leaving a deep and rooted legacy. Isn't that great? And Rob is still working with coffee. I don't really know exactly what he does, but he's in the coffee business, and he still has dealings with these people, and they live in Virginia.
I wanted to say a couple things. I'm Jeff Garner. This is my family, and my wife Lucinda, and some of our children. We have quite a few children. We actually have 15. And Barbara and Jim would come to our birthday parties. And they would not come empty-handed. They would always bring a piñata. And Jim had a big deal about piñatas. He loved to hang up piñatas, and he was an engineer. So he knew how to hang up piñatas. And he knew how to move them where the kids couldn't hit them. And he loved to do that. And so we had I don't know how, it was double digits of piñatas in our house. And he was just great at that. And he was very upbeat, very positive. And I think one of the things that was his greatest character quality to me was mercy. And he loved people. He loved to hear about their needs and where they were at, and he was concerned. And when he would talk with you, he would look you right in the eyes. And as he would look you in the eyes, it wasn't just how are you doing, it's how are you really doing. Tell me how you're really doing. And he would be very concerned. And we're studying character quality of mercy right now in my family. And the two things that we see as a definition of mercy are forgiveness and compassion. And he had both of those qualities in an amazing way. He's very forgiving and very compassionate. And one of the things that I will never forget is how proud he was of Jimmy. He was so proud of his son. And he would tell me this story because he loved thinking outside the box. The greatest thing to him was thinking outside the box. His eyes would brighten up and he'd say, "Let me tell you what my son said when he was only a little boy." I went to him and I asked him, I said, "Jimmy, here's a glass of water. Now, is this glass half full or half empty?" And he said, Jimmy looked at that glass. He thought about it for a little while, and then he said, "Both." He loved that. He was so proud of Jimmy. And, he kind of thought, we all know how intelligent Jim was. I mean, he was very intelligent, and he was fun to talk to, and he was very proud of Jimmy, and I feel like he thought that Jimmy was wise beyond his teachers. Jim was his teacher a lot, and he felt like Jimmy had exceeded even his